Buenas tardes. As mentioned, my name is Jose Aranda, and I just want to thank all the organizers for inviting me and having this chance, this opportunity to have a conversation with Cristina. This is an extraordinary opportunity that sadly is an everyday topic. But before we begin, I just want to indulge all of you in a land acknowledgement. I ask, and on behalf of those present here today, of the Karankawa and the Tapaka'ishka people, the native peoples of today's Gulf Coast, that I be a guest on their unceded lands, and I offer my thanks for their generosity, and I wish them well in recognition of their current and past elders. I also recognize those U.S. native peoples and those native peoples who have traveled here from Latin America who have chosen to make Houston their home. I also pay my respects to your current and past elders. I hope what I have to say today, what we have to say today, might be of some use in some small way for the future of better relations between myself and you, ourselves and you. Gracias. Bueno, aquí estamos, por fin.
Así es.
Como te quiero preguntar, ¿cómo estás hoy? How are you today? ¿Y qué piensas? What do you think of as you approach today's conversation about your own book, about your sister, and everything in between?
Well, thank you so much for that, for being here and for the conversation. And thanks to all of you, of course. This is the first time that I'm going to be talking about Liliana's Invincible Summer here in Houston.
Oh, de veras.
So
Wow.
I am elated. I'm very glad that I finally get the opportunity to do so. So my special thanks to the organizers. It is always fabulous to have the opportunity to talk in the place where one lives. Right. So yes, it is always difficult to talk about this book, though. It is not an easy subject. It's as all the books that I've written is very personal, but this is a very personal wound. But I think it is important that we, as a community, talk about painful issues that are with us every single day.
Right.
And it is important as a society to put words to those wounds, to put words to that danger, so that other generations, that other people might be better prepared to identify and therefore protect themselves and future generations from the danger of gender violence and violence against women.
That's right. Well, your writing is so moving and at the same time so provocative. And one of the things I found both challenging, not at the level of reading, but challenging at the level of recognizing one's humanity, is just to take up the gestures that you fill the book with. And one early gesture I thought was very, very powerful. And I just want to read a line or two from it and then get your reaction to it, because I think in some ways, well, at least for me, this is, as you already mentioned, a call to action. Mm-hmm. The gap between us grows larger at times, so much so that I'm afraid I'll lose sight of her at any moment. Is she here leading the way because of solidarity or out of pity? Are you here because you know, Sorais, or because you want to know? I'm not so sure I make it through the rest of the day left to my own devices, bereft on the street, facing the past, which is always about to happen. It is right then and there that she turns, looking for me among the crowd, that big smile of hers, open as a cloud. Are you coming, she says. It's not a matter of knowledge, either producing or sharing. I have to admit, it is this hand that suddenly, abiding by, its very own motion forward, upward, attempting to reach yours. And I feel like there's a kind of double, at least a double reflexive response there. Sorais and you, Lily and you, maybe triple the reader and the two of you.
Yeah. Well, for those of you who haven't yet read Liliana's Invincible Summer, I think I have to start by saying that this is an exploration of the short life of my sister Liliana Rivera Garza, who was a victim of femicide back in 1990 in Mexico City. He was 20 years old. He was a student at the UAM, Universidad Autónoma Metropolitana, a very large and important public university in Mexico. An independent, kind, joyful young woman ready to take on the world, and whose life was cut short because of the controlling, toxic ways of an ex-boyfriend, Ángel González Ramos, who till this day hasn't paid for his crime. Ángel, there is an arrest warrant, a valid arrest warrant against Ángel González Ramos up until today. And all we know is that he ran away, perhaps to the United States. We're not so sure. But that's the scope of the book, which, by the way, even though it won the Pulitzer Prize in the section of memoir, I'm quite hesitant about calling this a memoir. I call it, when I'm talking, to myself about this book, I usually describe it as a work of documentary writing. I'm constantly moving between fiction and nonfiction right here, and I made use of Liliana's own archive. There was a really important element, something that allowed me to actually go ahead and write a book that I have been meaning to write for a number of years. So, going back to the scene that you are reading from, it is always very difficult to write a book about a story that we seem to know just so well. The patriarchal narratives about violence against women usually tell us a very smooth story, right? Usually the narrative that encapsulates these very complex stories is called the passionate crime narrative, which usually exonerates the perpetrator and blames the victim. I wanted to move away from that narrative, and that's the reason why I ended up making every single decision in this book. And one of them is obviously related to how to start this book.
Right.
Where exactly? When is the story beginning? Did it begin back in 1990 when the crime took place? Did it begin later when we were unable to catch the murderer? Did it begin the first time that I tried to write this book and I failed miserably? Did it begin when I was finally strong enough to open up the boxes where I knew we had stored Liliana's belongings and own writings? So it was complicated, as you will know. Just starting a book never starts just once. It's constantly, if it is indeed a book, a live creature, so to speak, the book is constantly starting again and again. So finally I decided that one of those many beginnings was very much rooted in my going back to Mexico City and the whole motions that I had to engage into as I tried to open up the legal case once again. So in order to do so, I invited a very close friend of mine to join me because I knew it was going to be a very difficult journey. But I hadn't told her exactly what we were doing that day. She was that trusting. She just wanted to be with me. And throughout those early moments of the book, what I wanted readers to feel was precisely how disorienting walking through a massive, sprawling city like Mexico City could be when you are trying to decide if you are going to be strong enough to face all the bureaucratic procedures to open up a legal case like this once again. So in many ways I was invoking Liliana, as you well said, and invoking that spirit of friendship, of sisterhood.
Right.
I needed that strength close to me, and I finally decided that's something that I could share much easily with future readers of this book. That's the reason those are the opening scenes. I invite readers to join me through this journey, walking through Mexico City. Those of you who are familiar with Mexico City, you know that it's not like Houston. You actually walk in the city, and there are always lots and lots of people, and it's complicated. You have to fight for your space, and there is all this intensity too. You can get lost so easily. And I wanted to invoke all that energy, because in many ways that's the energy that surrounded Liliana's life 30 years ago in that same place.
Oh, thank you for that. And you're reminding me again why I love that little passage, because I think it's partly a kind of trope throughout the text of you reaching out for Liliana, Liliana reaching out for you, Soray's reaching out for you, you reaching out to the reader to make sense of this with you. And there's other moments where there's a physical reaching out, and I think one of the strengths of this book is that you're dealing with the metaphysical aspects, and you referenced this already, but you're dealing with the metaphysical aspects of death, loss, immateriality, materiality. You will say, is this real? When is this real? And so it's fascinating. But one of the things that strikes me in this part about the real is, and you've got a PhD in Latin American Studies, so you know that the statement you're making is a profound statement. You make a statement very early on. Do not believe for a minute that records live forever. Yeah. And then that's the reason why you move towards creating un archivo de Liliana.
That was the phrase that I was told by one of the employees of the General Attorney's Office the second time I visited this place. I was trying to locate Liliana's own file. And it was becoming very difficult. No one knew what to say to me. No one knew the name of a person who may know what to do. And so I was walking and going from office to office asking the same question: who could help me with this? Could you direct me to someone who could help me with this? And so it was a very long journey. And there was this encounter, which was another beginning of this book. Now I believe that this employee was rather generous. She was very honest. She told me, well, there is a great chance that the file is no longer with us. There is a great chance that we might have either misplaced it or lost it, or we might have discarded it, because after a certain number of years, that's what people do in these institutions. So when I heard that phrase, it hit me that the memory of my sister was in peril. That this is all happening, by the way, this was all happening around 2020. So we were all becoming increasingly aware of the epidemic about COVID, and how close some of us in certain age, how close we could be of dying. And so just learning that the file might not be where it was supposed to be forced me to think that if I were to die at that point, or if my parents were to die, then Liliana's own memory was going to be fading away. And that thought scared me so much, because as I said, I have been trying to write this book, and it just didn't happen. I read several, I wrote at least a couple of manuscripts, and I thought they weren't good. Once I tried to unearth one, and I showed it to my husband, just thinking perhaps this is not as bad as I thought. Perhaps I'm being so tough on myself. And so he read it, and then he said, "No, you better keep it where it is." And then, so I thought that was a really good comment, because it forced me to actually find the right form, the right medium for this work. So, and that comment from that employee was also really good for me, because then I knew that I was going to be invoking that institutional memory, but that I needed also a memory beyond the institution, that I needed to reconstruct Liliana's life, not only from the perspective of the state, but going beyond the reach of the state. And I've been calling that process the making of an affective archive. And so I knew at that point that I needed to conduct interviews with Liliana's friends, that I needed to talk to my parents and family members about her life, that I needed more information. It struck me that we knew very little, since we had gone through a forcibly silenced grieving process. Much had been lost over the years. So I knew that I had to do a lot of research to be able to write this book. And at the very beginning, I flew to my parents' house in Toluca, a city located very close to Mexico City. And I knew where the boxes were, where they were located within our home, the boxes where we had stored Liliana's own papers and all her belongings. I was looking humbly just for information. I wanted to get the names of my sister's friends from the time she was a student at the UAM. I wanted to call them, right? I wanted to have all this basic data. But I didn't know that when we put all these papers together, that we had also stored what now I call Liliana's own archive. Tons of letters that she had written, notes, postcards, doodling, blueprints, books that she had underlined. It was a treasure, and it was her own perspective, not only on her life, but on her world. And at that point, I knew that I finally had gotten to the materials I needed to write a book that could honor her life. And this is very important. This is a book in which, as I said, I'm exploring the femicide that my sister was victim of, but it's mostly an exploration of her life. I wanted to, most of these passionate crime narratives tend to emphasize, to pay a lot of attention on the dying, forgetting that all these women that we are missing, the women that we lost to domestic violence, to intimate partner violence, to gender violence, had led rich, complex lives. And so when I finally came across Liliana's own voice, then I knew, wow, I can write a book, not only about her death, but mostly, as I think Liliana would have loved it, a book about her life. I wanted to celebrate who she was, and the loving, complex, contradictory creature that she had been for the many of us that she had touched.
Right. And that strikes me like there's an intersection here between something you said earlier about the structure of this book and the form of it, the form of the book, and also the prospect of creating this effective archive. Is that you, in some ways, are engaging with the genre del testimonio, clearly.
Yeah, sí.
But you make a very conscious effort to say, this is not just my voice. My sister's voice is here too. And together, it feels like the combination sits on this other statement that you make very early on. In the future, I will say, this is the split second in which I understood how writing defies the state. Very powerful.
Well, yeah. You know how people tend to perceive writing as a solitary practice. When you see the pictures of famous writers, they're usually on their own. Tons of books in the bookcases behind them, and they're usually looking into eternity like that, like immensity, very serious, right? Well, I actually believe that we don't write on our own. The writing is a plural practice. Every time that I have dealings with language, I'm in fact touching and working with the experiences of the many speakers of that language, of the many communities that have kept that language alive. And that's the reason why I believe that writing is communal, is collaborative, is collective, and it is a practice as such. And so when I finally gather enough courage to read Liliana's own papers, that's what I thought. I'm going to write this book not about my sister, not on her life or her death. I'm going to write with her. I have this precious opportunity. I'm getting to read what she thought about the world, about her daily life. I even got hold of every single receipt she kept of the art tools that she bought at a specific bookstore. The 4 years that she was an architect student, and all of them were neatly folded and organized chronologically. So that's the kind of person that Liliana was. She was paying attention to the momentous, to the spectacular days, but she was also an archivist of the daily life, of these little documents that most people would just toss away, but she kept it, and that allowed me to have an idea of what she did, the kind of decisions she made, how much money she was allowed to have, right? How much money my parents gave her. So there is a richness about a possibility to peek into the richness of the materiality, the material life of Liliana. And so that's what I wanted to do from the very beginning. So I'm going to be paying attention to what she said. This is not, I thought, a book about my own grief. I'm not the protagonist of this book. Liliana is being forcibly silenced, and I was not going to continue with that silencing. I wanted Liliana to be the rightful protagonist. I wanted her to take center stage, and I didn't want to editorialize her. I didn't want to assume that because I'm living right now in year 2024, I know more than she did. So I tried to carve a very discrete position for me as an author in this book, and I wanted to create the scenario, the listening space, so that Liliana's words could be there on their own right. And that's for those of you who have browsed the book, you've noticed that we included some of her notes and some of her letters right here. And because I wanted the readers to have that direct connection to her. And an old friend of Liliana, a guy who was very much in love with her back there in the
Many
late
people were in love with her.
Yeah, it seems that she had that power. And he actually designed typography, a font that we used, the press finally used to write her sections of the book. And I wanted those sections to be generous because this is as much, it is my book and I take responsibility for that, but it is as much her book as mine. And then I could have just collected her papers and present that as a book, but then I said, I shouldn't do that because I don't want my sister to be on her own here with the readers. I have to be also with her. So when I'm talking about carving a discrete space for my own voice, it's because I didn't want to let her on her own. I wanted to be close by. So this is a book, as I'm prone to say these days, written in sisterhood.
Yes.
This is written by the both of us.
No, you. And it's very evident that sisterhood. There's a very poignant moment in one of the sections where the friends are telling you or talking to her, and there's a painful moment where she has an abortion, and you were unaware of it at the time, and the family wasn't aware of it, and that's, I'm sure, very poignant to find out that intimate detail about Liliana. But what I take as this gesture that's throughout the whole book of reaching out. As you were ending that section, you remember that there's a moment where you say, "I'm with you. I'm here with you. You're not alone." I found that so moving and impossible to think how you managed to write that.
You know, in general, I think of writing as that reaching out. This is a constant way, finding the strategies so that we can reach out and we can touch other people's lives too. There is something important about the grieving processes by families who've lost loved ones to violence.
Right.
The grieving is very complicated. It's very perverse too. There is a lot of guilt involved, and there's a lot of shame too. Wondering why we didn't see what was going on, what we could have done to prevent this. So these are questions that are a constant companion throughout the many years of the grieving process. And so thinking every single scene for me in this book, including the one that you are describing, was an opportunity to let Liliana know that had I known, had I had access to a precise language that could have allowed me to understand the danger that she was in, I of course would have been there.
Right.
But Liliana didn't have access to that language. My family didn't have access to that language. We as a society, we didn't have that language with us. The word femicide did not exist in 1990. People didn't talk about domestic violence, especially not in between boyfriends and girlfriends, right? Domestic violence is supposed that's supposed to happen within the domestic arena. And novios, they usually don't live together, right? And so there are all these silences around this violence, and that makes the grieving process so complicated. Being able to talk about this, to talk with Liliana's own friends, with members of my own family, and with Liliana in many ways through the reading of her own papers, I think is an essential part of of reaching out, but not of us going back to 1990, but inviting Liliana to come here to the present and talk to us about the complexity of her situation and about what is happening right now in our society too.
Right. And I feel like, you do put a lot of intent in this, almost mission-like intent, saying we have to find a new language, a more precise language to talk about femicide, to talk about intimate partner violence. That you say at some point, it's not just between a couple. It's not just within a family. It's something that has to be much broader, so that women understand. To have a whiff of, you use the word whiff, a whiff of it, and to understand that that is happening, and that the structure of patriarchy is everywhere, and it's so pervasive and so perverse in terms of structuring that violence against women.
You know, one of the most complicated things about understanding this violence against women, intimate partner violence, is that it gets intertwined with another very powerful language, which is the romantic love. Mm-hmm. So now we are in 2024, at least in Latin America, we have at least 2 decades of profound, very powerful feminist and women's mobilizations. And I believe they've been responsible for coining the type of vocabulary and concepts that are currently allowing us to see very clearly those moments of danger. So now we have words to name what is happening. Back then, in 1990, when you saw a guy throwing a tantrum, was called full of jealousy. We didn't call that a controlling attitude, right? It was, people thought that was evidence of profound love, for example. So, since, as I said, in more recent times, and thanks to these very dynamic and powerful mobilizations that have taken not only the public arena, but also public language, now we know that is called control, or this is called sexual harassment, or this is called labor harassment. Now we have words that might allow us to say, this is a no-no. This is something that I have to be concerned with. I have to stop this behavior right now. And something that I learned as I was reading Liliana's own papers and reading even literature of that time is that I had the sense that Liliana knew that something was off, that something was weird, that something was not right, but she didn't find the right words. She didn't have them. We as a society, we didn't have them. And let me tell you something. This is not a phenomenon limited to Mexico. No. Because then it's very easy to say, this is something that happens, in those countries with that kind of people. And it is true that according to public data, an average of 10 women are killed in Mexico for gender-related causes. But in the United States, in this country, 3 women are killed by their intimate partners daily as well. This is a lot of women, enough for experts to call this a silent epidemic. And in countries where various feminist mobilizations have been very, very active, there is that vocabulary. It comes to you almost naturally now. But in the United States, I realized not only we don't use the word femicide as much as we should, because there is an issue with gender violence and intimate partner violence in this country, but if you want to talk about the men perpetrating these kind of crimes in English, and if you say he is a femicider, people are going to look at you like you don't know enough English, right? Because the femicider as a word is not something that comes naturally to us when talking about these acts of violence. In Spanish, there is such a word, femicida. And so we're talking not only about a killer, we're talking about a very specific type of killer who targets women because they are women. And so now that I've been writing about these issues in English, I've been insisting in using the word femicider every time that I get a chance to do so, because there is an issue of intimate partner violence in the United States, and we need to develop the right language to prevent others and so that women in general are able to identify and protect themselves in these cases.
Absolutely, and you make note of the date and year that Mexico codifies femicide in the legal code, the penal legal code.
That was 2012.
Yeah, and it's obviously in this country we have a hard time, our judicial system has a hard time holding men accountable for all sorts of violence.
That is true.
Yeah.
Very true.
It's very true. I'm going to pull back a little bit in a different aspect of this book, if you don't mind. I was looking through the various things that's on the internet when you're present, and one of the things that's present is a nice little video that the MacArthur people did with you. And in that, you describe yourself as a border person from Matamoros and all that. And obviously you are. But one thing that struck me about reading your book is, and this is a term that some critic has used elsewhere, I don't remember that person's name, it reads unbordered. The geography is, you walk in, you start in Mexico City, but you will go to Toluca or you be in Houston, and there's not a sense of the typical border language that I find in my work and with Mexican American literature. It's not bordered. It's as if every place is placed, but every place is now. And I find that a very interesting mode of writing.
Yeah, well, it is very complicated to write about violence. It's such a slippery terrain. There is the danger of banalization, the danger of re-victimizing the victim, the danger of stereotyping, and many more. And all of them were in my mind as I was trying to write this book. I wanted, as I said, to honor Liliana's own very complex and lively, rich life. And one of the things that I didn't want to do was to convey the message that this was a problem limited to certain regions of the world, and that it's only, or was, or is, and remains only relevant for certain communities. Objective data tells us otherwise. There is this fabulous author, critic, her name just escaped me right now, but she's so good. I'm going to remember her. But she speaks of our age as an age of the unleashed war against women. That this is a worldwide phenomenon. Mm-hmm. And so in order for me to convey this perspective, it was very important to make every single place a place that you could connect to, that you could feel as your own. Not a place that was secluded somewhere far away where danger lurks, right? But as familiar to you as the swimming pool that we have here in the cover. Let me tell you a story. When we were deciding about the cover of this book, one of the suggestions was a very quaint image of a very old Mexico City. And I was thinking, that is not exactly what I have in mind. This is not what the book is going through, and you've described that from the very beginning. This is a bustling, lively capital city. So we tried several images until we got this one. And as you can see here, we see a woman diving. This is connected to an activity that was really important for Liliana and for me, swimming. And so I thought, many of us have gone through that experience. Perhaps this is something that we might relate to in different ways, organically perhaps. And so that's the reason why this is right here in the cover. The idea was exactly as you had expressed it right now. Every place is relevant, every place is now. We're not talking about the past, we're talking about something that is going on right now. The danger is now, but the possibility of overcoming this danger is also here with us, and it's now.
Oh, that's great. And if you haven't read this, you should read it to the end, and you'll see how the end is connected to the cover.
I didn't want to say that.
No, they should read it. They should read it. But I think this is a perfect time if you give us a little reading from your book.
Well, we've been talking about Liliana, and I think something that I like to do when I'm reading from this book is I would like to read a section that Liliana wrote herself. This is one of her letters. I want you to have an idea of her own breathing, of her own sense of humor too, the connection that she had with, with things from advertising to friendship to her own body. And there is also a mention here about swimming pools, about water, and about chlorine. So here we go. This is the last page of my notebook. Well, the first one from back to front, you know what it means? Depending on how you look at it, because it is a matter of thinking young, it is a matter of thinking positively, a matter of focus. Don't you like that ad? Oh, well, I do. So what? Well, nothing. I am in such a completely lazy mood, and I am very sleepy too. And when you suffer from those two conditions, but nevertheless, you also have an aversion to sleep during wake hours, there is this very big shock. And do you know what happens? Well, in addition to sleepiness and laziness, a very funny foolishness crops up that is happening to me right now. So much so that you even feel like sitting down or laying down or kneeling just about anywhere. And then it just so happens that you inevitably start thinking, and you turn to look at the clock on the wall, and you think that your mother is going to arrive soon, and that you have to pay your school tuition bill, and that today you did not see Angel, and you don't feel like training. You also think that you no longer want to train because when you are not in a quiet environment, it is impossible for you to develop your concentration and full physical potential. And you think that your exams are almost here, and above all, you worry. But your worry is not big enough for you to get up, grab your notebook, and study, right? Well, something similar happens when you are like this, because it's something exactly like that, And if you don't know how to express what you are thinking, then something happens that seems very strange to you. It is something like wondering if you really are the one who is writing, as if, and suddenly, as if by magic, you remember a dream. I don't know when I had it. And as soon as it arrives, it just goes away and you forget it. And you're even more sleepy now, and more. And ouch, your back itches. You scratch with fury because it bothers you that you can't scratch comfortably. Geez, and you wonder why they put so much chlorine in the pool. It makes my skin so very dry. And dryness is not the worst, but what dry skin gives off, itching. So you keep on thinking about the swimming pool and the chlorine, which in addition to the itching, leaves a characteristic smell of the so-called substance whose chemical symbol is Cl. And then you remember your chemistry class and something else as a result, but it is nauseating and you prefer to leave it in peace. Peace. Damn, what if there was peace? What if there were no people starving in the world? What if there was justice? What if people really appreciated other people for what they are and not for what they look like or their image? What if I fall asleep? What if you knew what would become of me? Thank you.
Bueno, se fue el tiempo muy rápido. We're at the end of time here, but I want to thank you for writing this book. Thank you for giving yourself. Thank you for giving us Liliana. And I think this is just a wonderful moment to share with all of you here in Houston, and I'm glad we had this time together. Please join me in thanking Cristina.
Thank you so much.